This is something that happened back in the 1990s when I was a kid. I think I was about 10 years old, and I remember that one night I went to Toys R Us with my mom. Being a kid, I always loved going to Toys R Us. It was one of the most fun stores to go to as a kid in the 90s, but on this particular occasion, I wasn't getting anything. It was my younger cousin's birthday party that weekend, so we were going to get her a present. I don't remember why, but my mom left to go there at night. It was after dark, but I don't recall the exact time. Anyways, when she said she was going, I asked to go with, because I always wanted to look at the video games there. It was in the winter time and very cold out, so I remember that I put on my big winter coat and then we left. So we arrived at Toys R Us, and I recall that the store was not very busy. After making it inside, my mom was going to look around for something for my cousin. I knew she would go over to the girls' toys, so I told her that I would catch up with her in a bit and I wanted to look at the video games. My mom said that was fine. Almost every store that we went to that sold video games, I would go over there. Like Target or Walmart, I would play the video games while my mom shopped. So I walked over to the video games section, which was on the left side of the store, and my mom went to the right. I got over there and started looking around. I was looking at the PlayStation and Nintendo 64 games. The store was still very quiet, and I started looking at what was over there. I remember that after being in the video game aisles for a few minutes, I heard someone approaching. I looked over to see another kid who appeared to be several years older than me, like maybe 13 or 14 years old. He saw me and then went into another aisle. I thought nothing of it. But then, about a minute or two later, he came back around the corner and approached me. He said hi and asked me what video games I was looking at. I told him, and I wasn't sure why he was talking to me, but I figured that he was just being friendly. We started talking about our favorite video games. I remember that he seemed really excited about the video games that they had for sale there. He was pointing out his favorite ones to me and was being really friendly. Then, after talking for like 2 or 3 minutes, he said that he was going to let me go, and then he walked away. I just kept looking around at video games for another few minutes, and then figured that I would go and find my mom. She might be done with her shopping soon. So I left the video game area and then wandered over to the girls' department where my mom would be. When I was walking over there, I turned to go down an aisle, and I saw the other kid who had talked to me just minutes before. He was looking in my direction, but was really far away. I sort of saw him out of the corner of my eye when I did, and then I just continued. I soon located my mom, who was finalizing which thing to get for my cousin. I went over and stood by her, waiting for her to finish shopping. A few minutes into that, and I soon saw that kid again walking by. He didn't seem to be at the store with anybody else. I found it a little bit odd that I kept seeing him, because he walked by again a few minutes later. Pretty soon my mom had finished her shopping. We headed up to the front of the store to check out. As we were checking out, I saw that kid yet again, now walking around past the checkouts. He kind of seemed to be just wandering the store. I didn't really think too much of it though, but I remember that he didn't seem to have anything with him either. After my mom finished checking out, we left the store. We were in the parking lot walking to the car when out of nowhere I heard someone approaching quickly right behind me. I turned around and looked back to see that same kid right there. He was literally right behind me, and I was really confused. He just seemed weird to me. He then stood there for a moment before saying that he saw I was leaving and just wanted to say bye. I was just like, okay, bye. I might have been a 10-year-old kid, but I knew that he was acting strange. Then he walked closer and grabbed at the hood of my coat. I also was wearing a winter hat, I remember. When he grabbed at my hood, I remember that I felt there was something in it, and then he put the hood over my head. When he did, I felt him take whatever was in my hood out of it. I had no idea what was going on. He then said, "It's cold out, I'm just helping him out," as he looked over at my mom. He then quickly moved away, except I saw that he now had a video game in his hand. It looked like a Nintendo 64 game. Then he started walking away really fast, and that's when I realized that the video game had been in the hood of my coat, and I had no idea. My mom and I watched as the kid now jogged out of the parking lot to a nearby sidewalk. I realized that he had used me to shoplift. When we were looking at the video games, he must have put the game in the hood of my coat without me noticing. Then I simply walked out of the store with it, and he had been keeping tabs on me. It was impossible to see the game inside my hood because my coat was so big. All he had to do was get it from me after I left and then run away. I told my mom this, and she went back inside the store with me and reported it. Then we left. I'm not sure what happened after that. I'm guessing they never caught the kid. It's still something crazy that I will remember from time to time. Sometimes I wonder if that kid went on to be a famous bank robber or something like that. I hope not, and I hope that he stopped stealing. One night back in the early 2000s, I was shopping at the local Toys R Us. I was looking for a gift for my son's birthday. This Toys R Us I had been to many times before. It was only a few miles from our house where my husband and son were. So I got to the store and started looking around. It was not hard to find stuff that my son liked at Toys R Us. I easily found 2 or 3 gifts for him pretty quick, and I was continuing to look around. During that time, I remember that I was in an aisle sort of in the middle of the store, but it was a smaller aisle. The store was also very quiet by now, with it being nighttime. Only a few other shoppers were scattered around here and there. So, as I looked around in the aisle, I heard quiet footsteps and then looked over. When I did, I saw this man walk into the aisle that I was in. He was wearing this really creepy old man mask, the kind that goes over your entire head, and it looks super realistic. As soon as I saw it, it made me jump back because of how disturbing it looked. The guy entered the aisle and then just looked at me. I told him, "You scared me." He had no reaction at all. He just stood there. Then, after a few seconds, he just walked away out of the aisle. It was a really weird thing to see, and it made my skin crawl. I tried my best to just forget about the guy and continue with my shopping. After a few minutes, I mostly was able to. I was in another part of the store, and then I turned and went down this other aisle. It was one that went towards one of the back walls of the store near the corner. As soon as I turned into the aisle, I noticed the man again. He was standing with his back to the wall at the very end and facing me. He was just standing there, not moving, and staring in my direction, still wearing that creepy mask. This caused me to instantly turn around and walk away. I moved to another part of the store, and at that point, I honestly considered just leaving. But over the next few minutes, I didn't see the guy, and I was able to find some things in another part of the store. I would say that I stayed inside the Toys R Us for maybe 10 more minutes or so, and then I decided to leave. I went to the front and checked out. I got my son a few gifts, and then left the store and went to my car. However, when I got inside my car in the parking lot, before leaving, I surprisingly noticed that man again. There was another car parked in a different parking space across from me, but kind of far away. I'm not good with estimating distance, but it was probably like 100 feet away from me and a little to the left. There were not many cars out in the parking lot anymore, so that made it easier to spot him. Plus, his car was facing the direction of mine. It was a smaller car that was a sedan that he was in, and the man was sitting in the driver's seat still wearing the mask, which surprised me. It gave me a bad feeling, because he was just sitting there not really doing anything. I was hoping that he would leave. But then I decided to leave, because obviously I wanted to get out of there now. So I backed up my car and then went to drive off. Except as soon as I started moving forward, I noticed his car pulling out of the parking space. This instantly gave me a bad feeling. Of course I had thoughts that he was following me. He already had creeped me out multiple times that night. I didn't know who he really was or what kind of intentions he really had. I pulled up to the stop sign at the end of the parking lot, still seeing him driving through the lot now. I then merged onto the quiet road that went past the Toys R Us. Most roads were not very busy at this hour. After I started going down that road, I looked back to see what the man would do. He completely blew through the stop sign and turned into the direction that I was going. It wasn't more than 30 seconds later, and he was right behind me. I thought that he must be following me now. When it came time for me to turn to another road, I took the turn, and the guy behind me did as well. I was still driving home at this point, but knew that I couldn't continue going there with that masked man following me. I didn't want him to know where I lived. So after going down that road for a ways, and realizing that the man was not going to give up, I took an exit. I then drove down that road, and then crossed the highway, and went back on it going the opposite direction. For some reason, my only thought was to head back to the Toys R Us. I'm not really sure why, but that's what it was. The creepy man following me also did all the turns that I did and was still behind me. So I drove down that road, took an exit, and then came up to the Toys R Us again. Soon I made the turn back into the parking lot. I would feel slightly safer in the store knowing that there were at least a few other people around. I parked in the closest available parking spot to the doors, and then the man drove a ways down and went to park not right next to me, but still pretty close by. I got out of my car and then quickly started walking for the door. I thought that the man might get out of his car too, but he did not. When I had made it almost to the entrance, surprisingly, I saw his car move from the parking space that he was in and start to drive away. When I got inside the store, I kept watching from just inside. He left the parking lot entirely. This made me feel better, but I still went over and reported him. I told an employee of Toys R Us what was going on, and then I left the store again. He was gone still. I got into my car and then very carefully drove home. Thankfully, the guy never showed up again. I was worried that he might show up at my house or something, but he did not. I'm not sure if he really had bad intentions or if he was just trying to scare people, but I think the fact that he followed me for so long when I was driving home is more than just trying to be scary. He probably figured that if I was reporting him to the Toys R Us, the cops might get called or a manager might come out. Either way, I'm glad that he left. I worked at a Toys R Us for a few years a long time ago, back when they were open and popular. It was a cool job to have for the most part. I was a young adult, so it hadn't been that long ago since I had been a kid, and it was cool to be around all the toys and stuff. It was a lot more interesting than working in other stores, in my opinion. While I worked there, I did a little bit of everything over the years. I started out as a cashier and then began doing more stocking shelves and things like that. Most of my coworkers and managers that I had were nice people and fun to be around. Some of my coworkers and I would joke around and stuff. Overall, it was a fun environment. But one night, it was actually pretty crazy, and something happened that I will never forget. I remember that I was working a closing shift. We closed at 9 p.m., so I had worked since sometime in the afternoon that day. It was an average night in the store, and not too busy, and not totally quiet or anything either. So we closed at 9 o'clock, and by that time, it was me and two other coworkers. One was the manager, John, and the other was my coworker, Kevin. After closing, we would stay after on average for 30 minutes or more, because we had to go around and clean the floors and make sure that the shelves and displays looked good, and John the manager had to do other stuff too. If things were crooked or out of place, we had to fix it and stuff like that. On this night, John the manager was doing work up at the front with numbers or whatever, and Kevin was cleaning. I was left to go around the store and make sure that everything was good. This is something that I actually liked doing. Usually, there would be some stuff on the floor or out of place, but not too much. So I started going around the store after close on this night and reorganizing things. I remember that about 10 minutes in, I was in one of the aisles towards the back of the store. It was then that I heard footsteps not too far away from me, but thought nothing of it. There were two other people with me in the store after all, so it was probably one of them. As I continued with my work, I soon heard the sound of something being knocked over a little ways away. It was out of my sight, and I was a little curious as to why Kevin might be over there. Probably 5 minutes after that, I had now moved to a different spot. I heard footsteps again not far away. Then, not long after this, a random small stuffed animal came flying over the shelf of the aisle that I was in and nearly hit me. When this happened, I knew that it had to be Kevin, but it seemed strange. Kevin did joke around sometimes, but usually not to this degree. I instantly asked why he did that, and I took the stuffed animal and tossed it back over the shelf. There was no response, and I heard the animal hit the floor. But then I heard footsteps moving away. I had a sort of bad feeling, like maybe it wasn't Kevin. But I quickly told myself that that was not possible. We always made sure that nobody else was in the store before closing. So I continued working. When I was around on the other side of the store, I once again heard footsteps not too far away, but saw no one. Finally, I had finished what I was doing, and I went back over and located Kevin. When I did, I asked him if he was messing with me. He said no. He completely denied throwing the stuffed animal at me, or even going near me. He said that he had been cleaning the floors near the front the whole time. And I believed him. I told him that I thought someone else was in the store. It was possible, but seemed unlikely. We always announced multiple times on the store loudspeaker that we were closing, and then we would go around every aisle and make sure that it was empty before we locked the doors and stuff. So I didn't know how this was possible, but I knew that somebody else had been walking around the store with me. Kevin and I went up to the front and found the manager, John. We told him that we thought somebody else was in the store. John then went on the store loudspeaker. He announced that we were closed, and if anybody was inside, they would have to leave now. He said that it was not a big deal, but they had to leave or else it would be trespassing, and the police would be called if they didn't. After this store-wide announcement, nothing happened. We didn't hear footsteps or anything. So we all decided to go around the store and look. This is when I was really freaked out. I didn't know who it could be, and it seemed like they were not wanting to be found. I looked around the store by myself as the three of us spread out to be more efficient. However, after looking around the entire store, we didn't find anyone. I didn't hear any footsteps or anything either. And after all reporting back to the front of the store, nobody had seen anything. Now I was really confused. There's no way that I was just hearing things. The stuffed animal being tossed at me confirmed that. And I didn't really think that Kevin would pull off that elaborate of a prank. John the manager certainly wouldn't either. John turned off the lights to the store at that point, and he said that we could call the police if we wanted, but there wasn't much else that we could do. It kind of seemed like John was a little bit skeptical of the whole thing at that moment, But then, after the lights turned off and after John spoke, we heard footsteps off in the distance. All three of us heard it. We knew that somebody was in there now. He had to have been hiding in just a really good spot. John then said, "That's it, I'm calling the cops." He then walked over to the phone to dial. Kevin actually ran towards the sound of the footsteps. Within seconds, the footsteps turned into the sound of running. I could not see, but could hear. Kevin was now running after. They seemed to go farther and farther to the back of the store. The next thing I knew, I heard a door opening, and not long after, I heard nothing more. Kevin came back like a minute later, winded. He said that the guy had left out the back door. So he had run to the back room, and then he found the back door and ran out of the store. The cops arrived a little while later. We all had to talk to them for a little while. Then I went home. I don't know what happened with the guy. I don't think the cops arrested him or anything. I don't even think they found him. But it was a really crazy thing. I wonder what that man's plans were by staying in the Toys R Us that long after close. This is something really crazy that happened to me when I was a high school senior. I still don't have an explanation for it. It all started one random night. I was a senior in high school. Back then, I played a ton of video games. I really didn't have a whole lot of friends or do a whole lot of social stuff. Most of my nights I would be in my bedroom gaming. I did have a best friend named Josh though, and we would hang out all the time, or at least game online together. We went to school together as well. I should mention that this was back in like 2008. So I remember that one night my mom had to work a night shift, which she occasionally did. Josh came over to my house, and it was just us there with my mom being at work. We were in my bedroom playing video games. Out of nowhere, at like 9 o'clock at night, there was a random knock at the front door. It freaked us both out, because why would anybody come to the door at this hour? We paused our video games and walked over to the living room. I remember looking out the window to see that nobody was there. Then we went over to the front door and opened it. I looked around outside, but whoever had knocked on the door was gone. It seemed suspicious. However, I considered that it might be somebody at the wrong house or something like that. But after opening the door, we realized that there was a sticky note left on the wall of the house right next to the door. It had not been there before, obviously. I picked it up and read it. The note said, "Toys R Us, tomorrow night, 11 p.m. It gave us the exact address underneath it. I had no idea what this meant, but I felt a little spooked by this strange note, and then we went inside. Josh and I talked about it, wondering what the significance of it could be. Was this left at the wrong house? Did whoever left us this note know us? Could it be someone from school? We didn't really know of anybody who would do this kind of a thing as a joke, though. Like I said, I didn't have a ton of friends, so nothing like this had ever happened before. Josh and I then debated showing up to see what would happen at the Toys R Us if we went there, but overall it just seemed too sketchy of a situation. We returned to playing video games until Josh had to leave to go home later that night. The next day after school, Josh and I were hanging out again. At night, we were at my house with my mom working late again, so it was basically the same setup as the previous night. As it started to get late, we remembered the note from the previous night. I guess we were both curious, and we talked about it for a while, and then decided to go. We both left the house and went out to Josh's car at about 10:30. The address of the Toys R Us that we were supposed to go to was one that was not that far away. It was one that I had been to as a child. However, the store had recently closed the previous year, and now it was just an abandoned building. But it still had the Toys R Us sign and stuff, so that was already weird to go to this abandoned place. And I'm not going to lie, I was pretty nervous. Josh drove us to the location, and we arrived at probably 10:45, so we were a little bit early. When we got there, Josh backed into one of the spots on the far side of the parking lot. It was completely empty aside from us, and really dark too. There were a few high dim lights at each corner, but other than that, nothing. The large Toys R Us building was completely abandoned and empty. It was dark and completely silent in the parking lot. Josh and I debated leaving, but we decided not to. We were talking to each other, wondering who was going to show up. It felt like we were on a stakeout, and it was both exciting and fun, and also creepy and terrifying. I thought that probably nobody would show up at all. I figured that it was all some kind of a prank, or just somebody randomly messing with us. Or maybe it was a mistake, and whoever wrote the note had realized that and now was not coming. The property of the Toys R Us was also kind of secluded. There was a lot more businesses down the road, but in this one particular spot, it was sort of on the edge of the commercial area. This quiet sort of access road went towards the other stores, but past the Toys R Us, it just went down and connected with a busier road. There wasn't much of a reason to drive past here anymore with the Toys R Us being gone, so the road surrounding it was really quiet as well. and around the building of the Toys R Us store was a small grass area, some trees, and fences as well. It continued to approach 11 o'clock. We were talking to each other still and debating all the possible scenarios. We were joking around a little bit, but I was actually quite nervous. Then, finally, it was 11 o'clock. At first, there was nothing, but Josh didn't leave just yet. We continued talking, and I was starting to feel less nervous, thinking whoever had left the note was probably not showing up. It soon became 11:01, and then 11:02. Then, all of a sudden, we saw these headlights come down the road on the opposite end of the parking lot. It could just be a random car coming down the road, I thought. But then the car turned into the Toys R Us parking lot. There was no doubt in my mind that this was the person who had left us that note. It looked to be an older but larger SUV, like maybe a Chevy Suburban from the 90s. The vehicle drove very slowly in the parking lot and then parked in a space directly facing us, but still a long distance away. It was next to one of the old cart corrals from the Toys R Us. We were still parked there, not knowing what to do, and we didn't move. Then the car flashed its brights at us several times. It was weird. We could not tell who was driving or how many people were in the vehicle. It was far away, and the windows appeared tinted. We still didn't move. After it flashed its brights a few times, it stopped doing that and then just sat there. There was no way either Josh or I was going to get out of the car and see who that was or what they wanted. After us and them were just sitting there in the parking lot for like a minute, suddenly the other car moved. It started driving extremely fast right away. In fact, it screeched the tires as it left the spot, and it was driving straight for us. Josh didn't move the car. I think he was too shocked to. Within seconds, the car got right to us and then slammed on its brakes. It stopped literally in the spot right next to us. We both looked over. Even though the windows were tinted, we saw this guy in the driver's seat and another guy in the passenger seat. They were both wearing ski masks and sunglasses with them. When we saw that, it was really scary. Josh put the car into drive and began driving away to leave. He instantly turned and went for the exit of the parking lot. The SUV went after us though. It followed us in the parking lot, and then right when we were making the turn to leave, the SUV actually bumped us from behind. Josh kept going as the SUV followed extremely close. We left the parking lot and went down that quiet road. The SUV backed off slightly but continued to follow. Neither of us said a word as we were both too freaked out to speak. We drove down that road and then went down another one. This road was also completely empty aside from us. After driving down that road with the SUV following us for a short ways, it suddenly turned and went in another direction. We drove the rest of the way back home completely freaked out. Both of us were now talking to each other, wondering what on earth had just happened. Josh got back to my house, dropped me off, and then left to go back to his house. Thankfully, there was barely any damage to his car from the bump. I went back inside and was terrified that the SUV would show up at my house. Thankfully, it did not. I never saw it again or got any more strange notes on my front door. It's still something that I think about. Josh and I are still friends, and we bring it up from time to time. That was one of the craziest events of my life.